And then we've got the whole ethical issue that they really dive into in a lot of these films that are coming out against meat, talking about how it's not okay to kill animals for our food, which I understand how people who are super disconnected from our food system can see things that way. But what they're not realizing is that tons of things need to die in order for us to have even our plants, and that plant-based agriculture isn't necessarily causing less harm than grass-fed cows.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrador. This is episode 118, and my guest is Diana Rodgers. Diana is a registered dietitian, an LDN, an NTP, and a real food nutritionist who lives on a working organic farm near Boston, Massachusetts. She is the author of 2 best-selling cookbooks, and she is the producer and host of the Sustainable Dish podcast. We invited Diana on this show because we were really intrigued by her new film project, Kale vs. Cow. Have you heard of it? The movie is in pre-production right now, but the plan is to examine the environmental, nutritional, and ethical case for better meat. So we're going to dive into it with Diana just now. You'll hear her own health story and what motivated her to get this movie project going. Before we do, we want to pause and recognize our sponsors. The Wise Traditions podcast is supported in part by the Weston A. Price Foundation. They are running a special right now on their shopping guide that helps you find the healthiest foods in supermarkets, health food stores, farms, and by mail order. It is available for only $2. Get yours today. Click on Order Materials on the website, westonaprice.org, and type in the words shopping guide. That's it. Kraut Pounder. Are you ready to get started with fermentation? Get yourself a kraut pounder from krautpounder.com. Each piece is made from solid maple natural hardwood. Visit krautpounder.com for more information. And SaunaSpace, the sauna for every body. SaunaSpace is the maker of incandescent-based, full-spectrum, EMF-shielded portable sauna solutions. They're handcrafted with love in the USA, so go to saunaspace.com to find out more. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Diana.
Thank you for having me.
You told me earlier that you had a childhood that was kind of characterized by sickness and dehydration, poor muscle tone, being in and out of the hospital, throwing up. It just sounded horrendous. Tell us a little bit more about what was happening and what did they diagnose you with?
Well, I grew up in a very small town, and the doctor told my mom that I just had lactose intolerance and to keep me off milk. So I had soy formula, actually, in my Cheerios and Corn Pops. But really what was going on, and I didn't find out until I was 26, was that I had undiagnosed celiac disease. And so I was very underweight. I couldn't keep anything in me. I was starving all the time. So anytime I could have eaten a full Thanksgiving dinner at any moment. And a lot of the answers were solved when I was diagnosed with celiac. So I had the biopsy. I couldn't believe at the time that someone could actually be allergic to gluten because I was eating it 3 times a day for my whole life. And
Wow.
So I just felt like it was the human food. And so how could you possibly be allergic to something that you ate for every meal? And coincidentally, I had been that very week that I was diagnosed, I was taking a vegetarian Chinese cooking class, and I had discovered seitan. And so I was eating that, I was like, oh my God, this is the most delicious thing I've ever had in my life. And it's exactly, wheat gluten. So it's exactly what I'm super allergic to. And still, I actually just got back from a trip to Costa Rica, and I ended up having a massive gluten reaction. And it was right during the meal, I said, oh my gosh, this is like the best chicken I've ever had. I don't know what, they flavored this with. And of course, the next day is when I got super sick. So apparently I have a major affinity towards gluten.
So they prepare that chicken probably with some kind of
wheat coating on the outside.
Oh, you poor thing.
There's a little bit of a disconnect there sometimes at restaurants,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So when you were diagnosed, I bet it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. If you say celiac to someone, they'll know immediately what you're talking about, or gluten intolerance. But back then you were probably like, what the heck, right?
Oh, yeah. I had no idea. And I really, at the time, thought that I was already eating kind of like what I thought was a healthy diet. I was low fat. I was eating lots of whole grain bread and, mostly vegetarian deep fried tofu dishes and all these things that I thought was so healthy. And it was a major shocker. And at the time, so I'm 44 now. So that was, quite a few years ago. There was only like one brand of gluten-free bread that was really bad. And I thought that it was like the most restrictive, horrific diet you could ever put anyone on. But I was very dedicated to it because I saw a major, change in my guts. And so my diagnosis, I think, was like on a Thursday or Friday. I had my weekend with gluten, ate, whatever pizza and beer and cookies and stuff. And then that following Monday, I have never intentionally eaten gluten since.
And now, not only that, but you're on a working organic farm, have a nutrition practice and a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that trajectory, how you went from that moment to now.
At the time, I was working in marketing, but I had worked on organic farms all through high school and college as my summer job. I love being outside and I love working, in the garden, and I loved selling vegetables. So I worked at a roadside stand. And I met my husband in college, and we had a little garden outside of our apartment. And we moved to Portland, Oregon to get like real jobs after college. I was in marketing and he was in market research, and he in particularly hated working indoors, the whole corporate everything. He was very miserable. And so he read a book by Wendell Berry called The Unsettling of America, Culture and Agriculture, and decided that he wanted to be a farmer. And so that was that. So he didn't have any experience farming and decided to go back and get his master's in soil science. And we moved back to Massachusetts. He went back to the college we went to, where I was an art major and he was an English major, except for this time he went back for his master's in soil science. At the same time, I was working in marketing, and then I had to transition to food marketing because I've always been such a foodie, probably because I was always so hungry growing up. And when I had our second child, it was too hard for me to have an off-farm job and the childcare. And my husband, he was working so many hours that it just didn't make sense for me to have this off-farm job with the childcare and everything. And so I ended up working on the farm, running our farm stand, and we happened to be hosting a raw milk co-op at the time. And so we had all these people coming in for their milk and butter. And I thought, what are all these people doing? This is insane that they're eating butter. And what is this raw milk business? And what is all of this? I started learning a little bit more. I went to a Weston A. Price conference, and it really blew my mind. I started actually eating butter. I had to hear it from Sally like 4 times before I actually started eating butter. And just incorporating that extra fat from the butter and from the fat on meat really helped me stabilize my blood sugar a lot better, because I was sort of on this blood sugar roller coaster. I went from standard American junkie diet to a gluten-free version of that. So I hadn't really embraced like everything about what I consider real food nutrition today. And I remember asking Sally, I want to become a nutritionist. This is what I want to do now. I want to help other people change their health. And she said, well, you have to become an RD. At the time, I think I was in my early 30s. I thought, oh my gosh, that's too much to go back to school. There's no way. I'm not going to do it. It's too expensive, too much school. And then I learned about NTA, the Nutritional Therapy Association. And so I decided, well, it's 8 months, it's relatively inexpensive, and, I think I could probably do that. Mm-hmm. And so I attended NTA, and right towards the end of NTA, I had to do a book report. And so I chose a book called The Paleo Solution, which had just come out. It had to be a book with a diet plan in it, and we had to follow the diet plan and then report on how it worked. And it really changed my life. So I had been sort of eating Weston A. Price all through my NTA experience, but I really don't tolerate carbs well at all. And I don't know if that's from the celiac and dysbiosis or whatever, but really going low carb. And I had read his book. It was a little too low fat, in my opinion, at the time. And so I sort of went ketogenic just because basically I don't like sweet potatoes. And so I pulled out pretty much all starch and carbohydrates from my diet and just ate like meat and fat and low glycemic vegetables. And my life went from like black and white to color. Then, my guts were good. My blood sugar was regulated. I didn't have to snack every hour. I mean, I really went from tunnel vision and shaking in between meals to being totally okay.
That's amazing. And what a beautiful descriptor from black and white to color. I feel like that definitely happened to you nutrition and health-wise, and then career-wise too. I mean, I'm picturing you and your husband in your jobs, you with marketing, him with his other stuff, and then switching to that soil science master's degree. And it just sounds really different in so many ways, 180 degrees.
So I opened a practice and it was going well. And lo and behold, everybody that was coming into my practice, it seemed like this real foods, relatively low-ish carb type diet was working for people. And so, whether it was weight loss or gut issues or whatever. But I also realized a lot of the people that were coming to see me were pretty sick because they would like Google, alternative nutrition on the internet. They were looking for somebody other than a classical RD to help them with their health. But at that time, I really decided, if I'm going to do this and work with sick people and try to really get some credibility in the medical profession, I think I do need to get my RD. And that way I could take insurance too, which is huge because, it's expensive out of pocket for people to pay for nutrition. And it allows me to see a much broader range of clients this way. And in Massachusetts, insurance pays really well for nutrition, which is great. It's not the case in every state. And so I decided to bite the bullet and go back. And it was basically a whole nother bachelor's degree. It was a lot more work than actually a master's degree because I had to do all of the sciences. I had to start with biology 101 and go all the way through biochem and classic RD training in food service and all that kind of business. And then after you're done, you do a 1-year unpaid internship where you work in hospitals. That was definitely really hard for me knowing what I know. And I'm glad that I did NTA first because it's really hard to unlearn things. And so I'm glad I sort of learned the real foods way before I did my RD.
Right.
Because now in my practice, I'm on the other side, thank gosh. So now in my practice, I actually do real foods nutrition, but I have the medical credential in order to see sicker people, take insurance and all that. So that's my part-time, couple days a week. I pack in all my patients. And then on the other days, I've really been exploring this intersection between nutrition and sustainability. So kind of working with everything that we've learned living on an organic farm where we do pasture-raised animals and organic vegetables, and really looking at what foods are the healthiest for the planet and for humans.
Diana, this is so much. Plus, to boot, you have a family. You have children, right?
I have 2 kids.
I'm glad you're healthy because you have a lot to manage. You really do.
Well, it's really fun because the kids get to grow up in this amazing environment. Our son, who's 13, is our best tractor driver and just knows everything on the farm. And my daughter is really interested in food and cooking. So it's a really nice lifestyle that we have.
Coming up, find out what Diana recommends that we do to improve the environment and why it's a better choice than going vegan. We pause now to recognize our sponsors. The Weston A. Price Foundation. They're running a special right now on their shopping guide that helps you find the healthiest foods in supermarkets, health food stores, farms, and by mail order. It is available for only $2. Guys, this is an amazing resource. The foundation has done the homework for you. In regards to cheeses, meats, cream, butter, spices, I feel like I've died and gone to heaven when I start flipping through this resource. I really do. So get yours today. Click on Order Materials on the website, westonaprice.org, and type in the words shopping guide. The Weston A. Price Foundation is dedicated to restoring nutrient-dense foods to the diet, and it really shows. Are you ready to get started with fermenting? Well, then get yourself a kraut pounder from krautpounder.com. Kraut Pounder makes beautiful pieces for the process. You might as well do it in style. Each kraut pounder is turned from a solid piece of maple, natural hardwood. They each have their own unique markings and are finished with natural walnut oil. These are quality pounders that were inspired by a kraut pounder that belonged to the grandmother of a member of the Eugene, Oregon Weston A. Price chapter. You've got to check it out. So go to krautpounder.com and get fermenting today. And Sauna Space, the sauna for every body. Sauna Space crafts modern products that bring ancestral light therapy and heat therapy to everybody with accessible and flexible design. Experience the rejuvenating power of ancestral healing in the convenience of your own home with Sauna Space. They harness the unique combination of natural near-infrared light and heat therapy, delivering full-body healing and detoxification. You guys, I just ordered my single light panel to get started, and I am super excited about getting going with this therapy. It's safe full-body detox and deep cellular regeneration. And by the way, all of Sauna Space products exhibit beautiful craftsmanship, and they are backed by a lifetime warranty. So go to saunaspace.com, use the coupon code WISETRADITIONS, all caps, one word, Wise Traditions, for 10% off the cart at saunaspace.com. You can also just visit their website for more on the healing science of incandescence. That's all at saunaspace.com. One reason I wanted to bring you on the show is because you have this new project, this documentary you're starting to work on. Tell us about it.
So I've thought about doing a book or a documentary on this topic for a really long time. And there's been just so many vegan documentaries out there that I just felt like now was the time to do it. I have a friend, Kristen Canty, who you might be familiar with. She did it. Yep. So she lives up the street from me. We're very good friends. And actually, we supply her restaurant with vegetables. And I've partnered with her a lot with the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund on a bunch of projects. And so she was super encouraging for me to just do it. She didn't have a filmmaking background, and she just kind of, you figure it out. And I didn't have a podcasting background or a nutrition background before I decided, I want to do this. So I interviewed a bunch of different directors and found somebody actually whose family started a dairy company, Maple Hill Creamery. And so she's very familiar with the regenerative agriculture story, the full fat and human health story, but she also is a filmmaker. And so it was just a perfect combination. She had a lot of really creative ideas. So we decided together that we were going to move forward with this project. And so the idea of the film is to basically de-vilify animal products, specifically beef, because that seems to be the one. I live in a pretty educated suburb of Boston, and nobody eats red meat around here. They all think that it's bad for the environment, it's bad for their health. And really, red meat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods possible and one of our best chances at mitigating climate change. And so the film title, the working title anyway, we may alter it, but right now it's called Kale versus Cow, The Case for Better Meat. And I'll be exploring the environmental, nutrition, and ethical case for more well-raised cattle in our diet and for the planet.
I'm so glad you're taking this on because you understand it not only because you've experienced the benefit of eating full-fat, pasture-raised, hormone and antibiotic-free meats, but you know the science behind it as well, don't you?
Right. I have the privilege of, going to nutrition conferences and talking about sustainability issues, but then I also go to grass-fed beef conferences. I went to the Grass-Fed Exchange. I'm going to the Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference and talking about nutrition. So I can really straddle both camps. And it's really a unique position because I find that a lot of environmentalists will, even if they're on the side of cattle are good for the environment, they tend not to think that it's good for our health. In fact, when I was at the International Bison Conference out at Yellowstone this past summer, none of the ranchers were actually eating the bison. They all thought that it was bad for them. And then you've got nutritionists, even in the real foods nutrition movement, who think that, we're eating way too much meat and we need to cut down on our red meat consumption and it's, not good for the environment. So there's really very few people that realize that red meat is both healthy and can be good for the environment. And then we've got the whole ethical issue that they really dive into in a lot of these films that are coming out against meat, talking about how it's not okay to kill animals for our food, which I understand how people who are super disconnected from our food system can see things that way. But what they're not realizing is that tons of things need to die in order for us to have even our plants, and that plant-based agriculture isn't necessarily causing less harm than grass-fed cows.
Vegetarians think that their lifestyle is gentler on the planet, but actually you need industrial scale vegetables to supply the vegetarians with all the vegetables they want. But this is the thing, Diana, what we don't want it to be is us versus them, right? And I feel like your movie may help us bridge that gap, that kind of antagonistic relationship we have with vegetarians and vegans.
I'm calling it Kale versus Cow just to sort of get some eyeballs and to let folks know that I'm tackling something pretty serious here. But at the same time, I have plenty of people in the plant-based world who are supporting my work. So, for example, Nicolette Hahn-Nyman lives on a working cattle ranch, has written one of the best books I can think of, Defending Beef, on the benefits of cattle for the environment. And she personally is a vegetarian, but she fully supports people eating more meat. And I did a really great podcast on why meat should not be a condiment, why we can't say, eat less meat, but we need more meat. And I also have somebody who's agreed to be in the film that is a vegan, but she runs a nonprofit trying to advocate for better meat and has done some really important work with some big meat producers, improving the lives of farmed animals. So opting out of the meat system is not going to help. Meatless Mondays are not going to help. And we need everyone to get on the same page here and advocate for better meat. So even if people, for whatever personal reasons, don't want to eat meat, and I can totally respect whatever their personal reasons are, it's ridiculous to think that the rest of the world is going to give up eating meat tomorrow. And so wouldn't we all want better lives for those animals?
I feel like one reason people think meat is unhealthy, we've been told that in a number of ways, but also recently the World Health Organization came out with a statement saying that they thought that red meat was carcinogenic. What would you say to those people who are concerned because of that statement in particular?
Every time a study comes out talking about how bad meat is, I like to point out the fact that most of these studies are looking at epidemiology. Correlation doesn't, prove any cause at all. Cancers take a long time to develop, and it's ridiculous to pinpoint meat as the sole cause of that. In the case of the World Health Organization study with the colorectal cancer, basically, the relative risk went from 1% in the population to 2% in the population. And so your chance was 1 in 300,000 if you ate bacon every single day in the case of processed meat. So to compare it to cigarette smoking is absolutely flawed logic.
And they're not the only ones that are doing that. I mean, in the movie, What the Health, didn't they do the same thing? Well, actually, they vilified eggs and a number of other things as well.
Yeah. And they said that meat causes diabetes. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not even possible.
What diet do you espouse? Do you follow Wise Traditions principles today? Do you go paleo, keto? Talk to me.
I initially mentioned before I went paleo or keto, actually, and I really saw dramatic change. But now that I have really honed in on what works for me, I do incorporate some, properly prepared beans and some rice sometimes. My kids can eat gluten. My husband eats gluten. Our house is gluten-free because of my celiac, and I just don't want any crumbs around at all. And I'm pretty sensitive. But I've found that it's not necessary to be so rigid, and it actually allows for a lot more enjoyment in life to eat as many different foods that don't cause problems for your body as possible. And so even in my nutrition practice, I might put them on an initial 30-day cleanse type diet, like something that looks a little bit more like a Whole30, or just kind of no processed foods, low-ish carb, high protein. But as we transition back into a more sustainable diet, sustainable lifestyle, I definitely think it's important to, incorporate as many healthy foods as possible.
So let's go back to the movie for a minute. If this movie, though, met its objective, what are your hopes for it and its impact on society?
What I'm really trying to do with the film is help people change their worldview. And that can be a really hard thing to do with just a sort of journalistic 60 minutes factoid and statistics type of approach, because in the general public, it's really hard to change someone's worldview just with information, right? Mm-hmm. You need to really hit them in the gut. And so what we're trying to do with the film is highlight stories of people who are involved with food production and to get people to see that we need more nature. We need to work more closely with nature. We don't need more labs producing food. We don't need more synthetic food. We don't need more lab meats and more fake foods. And the idea of us surviving only on plants is really a fallacy. And so if people can just kind of understand that we need more biodiversity, we need more of a connection with nature, then they'll easily understand why things like grass-fed beef are so important.
Yeah, I'm thinking of some big names like Bill Gates and Leonardo DiCaprio who are putting out movies or supporting this kind of meatless movement. And I hope this movie eventually gets in front of their eyes to help them have a paradigm shift.
I hope so too.
So what we'll do in the show notes, Diana, is we're going to put links to your movie project and some of the resources we mentioned on the show. As we wrap up, I want to ask you, if the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, of course, eat more meat. So protein is the most satiating macronutrient. The more protein you eat, the less calories you'll eat overall if you're looking to lose weight. It's also incredibly easier to digest than plants are. And it just shouldn't be feared the way it is. So there's whole societies that have lived on just animal products. And, I'm not talking about just steak. We need to be eating, all the parts of the animal. We need to be honoring the animal. But to think that we need more salad to feed the world is not true at all. We need more better meat.
Fantastic. Well, we support you 110%. Let's keep in touch. We'll be eager to tell our listeners how things end up with this project of yours. Congratulations, Diana.
Thanks so much.
My guest today was Diana Rodgers. To connect with Diana, go to her website, sustainabledish.com. For an overview of today's discussion and links to resources we mentioned on the show, just go to our website, westinaprice.org, and find the show notes for episode 118. Hey, and a big thank you to my friends at Podcast Village, Rob Ford, Charlie Burney. You guys are the best. And the team of interns, Cynthia Castro Cohen Enriquez, Joy de los Santos, Elisa Canty, Amy Marvin, and Lily Hempt. Thank you, each and every one of you. Next week, we're going to have a fascinating discussion, everybody, so you've got to tune in. We are talking to Paula Brown about homeopathy. Homeopathy is a natural approach to healing that has been around the world for over 200 years. But a recent FDA document threatens to limit our access to it. So tune in to find out more about homeopathy and why we should defend our rights to it with Paula Brown. Hey, and don't forget to look for me at Holistic Hilda on Twitter, at Holistic_Hilda on Instagram. I'm happy to connect with you on all matters pertaining to health and podcasting. So thanks, everybody, and keep on listening.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.